can help us with the recording and we can just get started.
Yes, recording has started.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. Welcome everyone. Welcome textilers to another training of the Azure computing. Okay. My name is Oluwato Sanishere. That's for the benefit of those that join us for the first time. I'm a mentor here with the textilers major especially in Azure and M365. Okay. Uh, we have our house rules. If you need to ask any question, kindly use the raise your hand icon. And if you want to contribute or ask question, of course, please feel free to interrupt to ask any question that is on your mind. And if you want to contribute, please feel free as well. And if you're meaning to use the meeting chat, it's okay. I will definitely read out the question and answer it here together. Please note that there are no stupid questions or contribution. We are all here to learn together and to learn from one another. So please take note of that. All right, so here we'll be moving on to the outline, and we are majorly focusing on identity and governance. Okay, so in this outline, we are about, I think we are getting towards the end. So what I'm meaning to do is that we have just two modules left, and that's module 5 and 6, and that will take us to the end of this Azure training. So I'm thinking maybe we can run those modules together and we can push our lab for upper, weekend, and all we'll be doing for the upper weekend will just be labs, basically labs. And if anybody has any question based on past labs, we can focus our attention on that. So that's the mindset. That way we can wrap up with this particular training and we're just left with the lab. That's the intention. It was supposed to end this week actually, but because of the event that took place last weekend, we couldn't hold our session last weekend. So the idea is to wrap it up this weekend and we're just left with the lab. I hope that's fine by us, please. All right. So,
Yes.
all right. Thanks for the response. Okay, so we'll go on. We'll talk about the Azure Identity Services, Azure Governance Feature, Azure Privacy and Compliance. So our focus majorly here is on, the identity governance as well as security and compliance. Please, if you think I'm moving too fast, try to call my attention. I would, take it slow and go over it again. That's if you think I'm moving too fast, I would surely, you know, slow down and ensure I carry everyone along. So we'll be starting with Azure Identity Services. And when we say identity, it has to do with, you know, um, who you are, like identity. So the objective here is to explain the difference between authentication and authorization, to define what the Azure Active Directory is, to describe functionality and uses of the Azure Active Directory, describe the functionality of usage of the conditional access, multi-factor authentication, and single sign-on. Now, all of those are just the features of the Azure Active Directory, and we'll be talking about them more in the course of the training. So let's start with comparing authentication and authorization. But before I do so, I think I want to talk a little bit on identity. Now, when we say identity, it just has to do with, you know, who you are, like who a person is, like are you able to describe or how are you able to identify someone within the Microsoft product. It's actually a service on its own and is referred to identity as a service. So it's something that you know it's been you can't just do without. It's part of the services. So it's usually it's a mode of security. Identity is also a mode of security. So let's take it to this um way where I can explain it. You get somewhere and you're trying to, the first thing is usually, they try to identify who you are. So it's a form of security, and this is it focuses on the authentication and authorization. Now authentication here has to do with verifying who a person is, like who are you. Then authorization has to do with what access do you have. So that's majorly the difference between this authentication and authorization. And of course, when it comes to authentication, yes, it has to do with verifying who you are. That is, they validate is when validate a system that is trying to access the right person, you know, requesting for legitimate access credentials. So that's basically what this is about. An authorization has to do with what level of access do you have, like what are those things that you're allowed to do. So let's take a scenario like you go to an organization, or you're working for a particular organization. Now, before you walk into the physical building, there's usually like a check or something just for each employees to identify who they are. So there's usually maybe a form of ID card to show that, okay, I am working for this particular company and all. And so that's that process where you're trying to show your ID card and all. You're trying to seek access into the building by identifying who you are, or by showing who you are, by validating, okay, this is who I am and I'm part of this organization. Now, the authorization here now has to do with, maybe depending on your department, this varies from organization to organization though. It has to do with, okay, what floors do you have access to? There are some organization whereby, okay, probably they own the building is like let's say 15-story building and all. So depending on your department, there are some floors you would have access to, and there are some floors that it's like out of bound to you. So the authorization there has to do with what level of access do you have in that building. Yes, we know you have identified yourself to say, this is who I am. I'm part of this organization. I'm an employee of this organization, and you've been able to prove that with your ID card. But then it now goes further to, what do you have access to? I'm sure there will be some places that are out of bound. Despite the fact that you staff, it's equally out of bound to you. Maybe yeah, in the marketing department, it will be like, okay, this is just the IT space, probably because of the servers and some other sensitive stuff, and it becomes out of staff to non-IT employees. So something like that. That's just trying to illustrate it. But the research is part of what's it called, identity, and this definition. So looking at what's on the screen for authentication, you will see here is letting us know that it identifies the person or the service seeking to a resource. It has to do with legitimate access credential, basis for creating. Now, if I bring it down here, whenever you're trying to access maybe M365 service or Azure service, you would agree with me that there's always that prompt for you to enter your credentials, which is the username and password. So what you're basically doing as at that moment is you're authenticating. Okay. Now, when you're able to gain access into the page, now the authorization has to do with the level of permission or the resources that you can, have access to. Maybe your role is just a user admin role, or your role is a global admin role, or your role is a user role. Now, depending on all of these things, it will determine what a level of access you can get. And that's why on the screen here is saying it defines which data they can access and what they can do with it. And that is the clear difference between authentication and authorization. Okay, so I don't know if we have any question before I move to the next slide. Okay, so please remember you can make use of the chat room if you have any question whatsoever, and please feel free to interrupt if you need to ask any question you want clarification. Now, still moving on, let's talk about Azure Multi-Factor Authentication, which we refer to as MFA. Now, MFA, in a simple word, I would refer to it as second layer security. So it's still around security. So I can refer to it as a second layer security or a two-factor authentication. And usually after users in a tenant or in an organization have been able to, render their authentication, which means providing their credential, username, of password, there's another level, that would enable you to, before you can still gain access or not. So there's a form of, and there's another layer, and that layer is the second layer, which means besides the credentials that you have provided, besides the username and password that you have provided, there's still one more layer, and that layer has to do with requesting you for either something okay, or something you possess or something you have. Okay, probably I should just ask us, what do you think are the examples of something you know? Okay, I'm trying to form a discussion here. When we say something you know, what comes to your mind? We all have phones, right? And we try to access our phones. Okay, so when we say something you know, anyone wants to go ahead to say something about that?
Maybe our phone numbers.
Okay, yes, phone number is something you know, you're absolutely correct. But this time around, in terms of security, you know, you have your phone, for you to be able to access your phone. Now, what are those things you do on your phone? I'm just using that as an example. How do you access your phone, especially if it's secured?
Unlocking the phone,
Yes, so how do you unlock it?
password, code, or
Thank
anything.
Exactly. Thank you. So you're either using password, you know your password. You're either using PIN, you know your PIN. So those things are, thank you. I'm saying chat in the screen chat and all saying type in your password. Exactly. You know your password. So you will type in your password. Some people prefer to use PIN, you type in your pin. Some people prefer pattern. You type your pattern, and also all of these things are like a form of security. So when it comes to the Azure Active Directory and all, uh, regarding MFA, of course, you can also make your second layer, okay, something you know. Maybe after entering the regular username or password, there's another password that you want to enter. Then it can also be something you possess, maybe your phone. Still using your phone, some people prefer, they have another method, like maybe there's another thing, or let me not use the phone this time around. Let me use internet banking and all. So besides entering their username and password or their PIN to transfer money, there's also something some bank uses, which is their token. So this token here is something you possess because it's a physical hardware, wherein when you press the button, it gives you some random token and all. So yes, then the OTP, which is one-time password, is it's also valid, but then you get that password from your phone. So something you possess, something that is handy. Don't forget that something you know is the things you have offhand that you can recite offhand or this. But the category of something you possess is usually an hardware. So it's like you have a phone, and from your phone you can get a one-time password, or you have a token. Don't forget, token is also hardware, although there are soft tokens, but I'm talking about the art token that's given to you for banks or all and all of that. So you can equally get this pins or random digits that you use. So that's also something you possess. Smart cards. There are some organizations that their ID card, open doors for them and all. So that's like a form of access and everything. So smart cards too can be a typical example of something you possess and something you have. Who wants to guess the category for something you have? Anyone? I'm sorry, I'm trying to look at the chat from time to time to switch in my screen to look at the chat as well as have my slide on. So if you notice any flicker, it's because I'm trying to look at the meeting chat. Okay, so something you have. Anyone wants to try? So I think I'll just go on so that I don't waste time. So when we say something you have, it has to do with something on you as a person. So we use our fingerprint to access. So fingerprint is a typical example. We use our face, like the facial recognition is also a very good example. The which other thing again? I know facial recognition. There's even voice recognition, palm recognition, retina high scan. Just something that is a part of your body that you can always, use to for security. So that's what this is are the categories when it comes to MFA. So in summary, I'll just say MFA basically it helps us to safeguard access to our data, while making it very simple for user. That's the purpose of MFA, and this is very common. This is common. There was even a joke I saw, on the social media regarding MFA. I don't know if some of us saw that joke. Like someone was saying, um my husband knows about us or something. And the guy was wondering, I'm sorry, who are you? And I think the person went on and said, okay, sorry, this is the husband, not the wife. God saved you. Then the person, it was a funny joke, but it was just around, two-factor authentication. So when it comes to this, it's really required organization make use of it more just to build some level of security around the data, as well as users can use that in the environment. So when it comes to something something you possess, or something you have, one can even say, okay, something has to do with knowledge. Okay, something you possess, yeah, possession, and something you have, a part of you, inheritance. So this MFA is equally part of identity. Now let's go ahead to now talk about the Azure Active Directory itself. Because yes, we've been able to understand MFA, we've been able to understand authentication and authorization. Then what is the Azure Active Directory itself? Of course, the Azure Active Directory is a Microsoft cloud-based identity and access management service. And basically, it helps employees in the organization to sign in and gain access to resources. Okay, and they make use of this authentication and authorization that we have actually spoken about earlier. Okay, so it's a solution. Basically, IT administrators and organization make use of it more. Okay, they make use of this thing because they are able to, grant authorization or access to users. It helps them to manage users, manage groups, and even resources. So it's cloud-based identity and access management service. And of course, we have some of the features of this Azure Active Directory. We have features like the sync authentication, which we just spoke about a while ago. And in fact, it's even authentication and authorization. They mostly go hand in hand. Okay, that way you're able to sign in and gain access, and the authorization is what the things you have access to. Now, we equally have single sign-on. Gone are those days where you have to cram, different password for different things. Okay, now it's something that is solved. It's a solved solution. You really don't have to start cramming different password. With single sign-on, you can use the same credentials to sign into other apps in your tenant. So what do I mean? Let's take, for instance, within the Azure space, you are using M365 services. And what do I mean by M365 services? Services like Teams, services like SharePoint, services like exchange online service, all these different services. Now, rather than having different password to sign on to them, with single sign on, you are able to sign into all of these different applications. Now, it's even more interesting when you have when devices are domain joined, that is, they are joined to the corporate network. It will not even require you to start typing out this username and password. You just seamlessly, once you have signed in the first time, every other application will be seamless, and you will just note that, okay, you're able to sign on freely. Let me show you an example of what I meant by that. Let me bring up mine. So I'll try to sign in to Azure. So I'll go on to portal.azure.com. Okay, so let me sign in to one of my tenants that I have. Let me use this one. Okay, 1 minute. I want to explain that single sign-on, or I want us to see what I meant by the feature of the single sign-on. Okay, so right now, because I am using MFA, like the second layer, and for me, I am using something I possess, which is my phone. And my phone here, I have this authentication app that I can go ahead to. So you will notice that after my first username and password, I'm still kind of providing another level of, authentication. So, and I do that from my mobile phone, which is it means I have MFA, and this is has to do with something something I have, and yeah, something I have, or something I possess, which is my phone. Okay, so now I am able to sign on to this service. Now watch this. I want to sign on to the M365 space. Now I have portal dot office.com. Oh, don't mind my caps lock. Now take note of what happened. Did you notice what happened? You would observe that I did not have to enter my username and password anymore. There was no need for me to do that. Now that is SSO. Okay, that's our SSO. This single sign-on, which is part of the feature of the Azure Active Directory, enables me, to do so. I equally have the application management, which means with my Azure Active Directory, of course, I can manage applications within my tenant. So these are some of the great benefits of the Azure Active Directory. We have business to business, which we call B2B, like the acronym is B2B. And what is this B2B? It's actually a service, an identity service. Okay, we call it business to business collaboration, and basically it enables our organization to securely share maybe the application and services with people that are outside their organization. That is, you can have guest user from any other organization. So let's look at it this way. We are textilers. So maybe textilers is an organization, and all of us present on this call, we are actually employees of textilers. Let's just have that scenario. Okay, so probably we want to collaborate. We want to collaborate with people that are outside our organization, and of course, because we are employees, or we are staff, or we are users on the textilers tenants. What it means is we are going to have our user account. Okay, our user account is going to be part of the textiler domain. So I'll have something like Kemi at textilers.com, Tosin at textilers.com, Dolapo at textilers.com. Such names you have, all these people at textilers.com. Why? Because they're actually employee of textiles. Now let's now assume we want to collaborate or have something to do with Microsoft organization. Microsoft is an organization, on its own. So what it means is with this B2B feature, you can invite guests, people that are outside your organization, people that are outside textiles, to be part of your directory such that you can collaborate. Maybe you want them to have access to resources or some of those things. So with B2B, you are able to achieve that. So you just send a simple, what's it called, invitation, and whoever. Now, don't forget, it doesn't have to do with just what's it called, domains. You're not only inviting people from other organizations. You can even invite people that just have their own personal account. What do I mean by personal account? Maybe you have a vendor, and that vendor is probably working for himself or herself and doesn't have this, big company setup, but he has an email address, a personal email address like Gmail and all, and you need this vendor to work with you in an organization. Just an example, just trying to cite a scenario. Of course, with the B2B, you can equally have such vendor who has just not a work account this time around, but a personal account or a Microsoft account. You can actually invite them, to be part of your Active Directory, but then they are going to be a guest user. And the essence of that is such that you, as an administrator in your organization, can be able to control what this guest does in your environment. I'm sure it makes sense to. We also have business to consumer. We call it B2C. Okay, so for B2C, this actually is also an identity management service, but this time around it's a little bit different for B2B. B2B has to do with guests, like inviting external users to be part of the Active Directory. But for B2C, it has to do with, what's it called? It has to do with having people authenticate using their own preferred identity provider. And what do I mean? Let's take, for instance, now you need to sign into, maybe there's this site that you want to sign up and all. So ideally for you to sign up, you need to start the process of entering your name, entering your filling the details of your address, phone number, email address, all of those things, such that you are able to sign up. Okay, but with the B2C feature, because you are actually part of maybe a network before and an account before, you just get to sign in. You see something like sign in using Google. That's because you already have a Google account, or you see something like sign in using Facebook. I'm sure some of us has come across things like that before. So you have to sign in using Facebook, or sign in using Google, or sign in using what's other one is common, maybe any of these social media, this thing you would see something like that. So it's also part of the Azure Active Directory services, and we have device management too, which with the Azure Active Directory, of course, you can always manage devices that are, you can register devices, you can manage all of these devices within your tenants. Okay, so these are part of the features of Azure Active Directory. These are the benefits you can also get as part of the Azure Active Directory. I don't know if you have any question before I move on, please. Okay, let me check the meeting charts if we have anything here. Okay, I think Ali, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name. You have your hands up. Could you help me with your
Sorry,
name?
it's Hafsat.
Okay,
Hafsat.
Afsat. Okay. All right. Okay, so it's like name and surname together. All right, great. So your hands is up, please. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm saying the B2C identity services. So for example, the one you said that being able to access maybe a website where they are asking you if you would like to sign in with Facebook or Google. So
Okay.
the website and let's say being able to, as in providing that feature of being able to access with Google and or Facebook. I'm just saying between that specific website and say Facebook or Google, would it be right to say that those two are B2B, and then that's we the user of the service will be the B2C? I don't know if I'm making sense.
Okay, I think I get that, but that's not outrightly
Mm,
the idea. Okay,
mm,
so this B2C, the idea is just for users to be able to use their own preferred mode of identity. And that
mm.
the reason is because this social media already has been, they have the information about
Okay.
users. So when it comes to authentication, so instead of the tenant trying to authenticate it's that identity provider that would do, it's the authentication. I don't know if I'm able to make sense. So
Yes.
when you enter username and password, the idea is an authentication will take
Mm-hmm.
place to validate
Mm-hmm.
to say, okay, this person has provided this username. Is it actually correct? Is it actually part of what is on our tenant? Okay,
Okay.
if it's correct, it will take you to the next step, which is enter password. The
Mm-hmm.
password you enter will be encrypted, and it will be compared with what the system already have. If I can use that in a simple English, okay.
Yeah.
If it's valid, of course you'll be able to sign in because it's
Mm-hmm.
correct. They have all your details already. But with B2C, so rather than the what's it called? This tenant, your aiding tenant doing such validation, your
Mm-hmm.
identity provider, your preferred identity provider will do such validation. Okay, so if you
Okay.
are saying, oh, I want to sign in using Facebook, which means you already have your details with Facebook, so
Mm-hmm.
that is where your authentication will take place. Basically, in simple English, just trying to validate that what you've provided is correct and you're actually a legit user who can sign in. Okay, so most of the time when you're doing that, what it comes with a feature with AAD is such that this business customer, you can just go ahead and assign in using those preferred identity. I don't know if you're able to understand, please.
Yes, I understand. Thank you.
All right, please. Any other question? Okay, so in the absence of no question, I believe we can move on, please. All right, conditional access. So conditional access too is another feature of the Azure Active Directory. Okay, and it has to do with, just the way the name implies is, let me use, that layman English. That's always, excuse me, a condition. So the idea is it to enable you to enforce controls on access to things in your environment, things like apps in your environment, devices in your environment, such that you're able to, control these things from a central location. Okay, so when it comes to conditional access, it has to do with policy. So the policy that you have put in place, so you can use a conditional access to enforce policy. Now let's take it back to the beginning of the class. When we started, we learned about authentication and authorization. We learned that, okay, if we have these valid credentials, username and password, we'll be able to gain access. We know that. We now know that authorization is okay based on the permission given to me. It shows, okay, what level of access can I have? Now we understand that this MFA has to do with, okay, a second layer of security, such that it enforces security. You understand? Now the conditional access does more. It enforces more of policy, in place. Gone are those days that people can decide, okay, because it's cloud, I can work from anywhere. I can work using any system. If I don't have to use the company system, I can just use my own personal system and get things done. I can have access. But with conditional access, you can restrict all of that. Okay. Although we understand that the benefit of cloud is accessibility, work from anywhere on any device. But some organization wants to control that. They want to control the fact that, okay, yes, you're an employee of my organization, but I don't need you working from, Afghanistan. I'm sorry, that country just came to my mind. I don't need you working from any country, Israel or US or Nigeria. You understand? So they can place a restriction based on location, IP location. Okay, so it has to do with policy, and the policy is always there's a condition and there's an action. So there's a condition of if a particular user wants to access maybe this app or these services, let them do this. So there's usually a condition that is in place. So there's a condition and an action, and the condition is actually divided into the who parts and the what. And what do I mean by who? Like the person, the users that are trying to access it. It can be users, it can be group. Those are the who. And the what is usually the exact thing they are trying to access. Are you trying to access an app? Are you trying to access a resource? The exact thing you are trying to access is the what aspect, and there's an action before this can be done. So I can say if AFSAT wants to access maybe Microsoft Forms, okay, let's it require multi-factor authentication. That way, the policy has enforced multi-factor authentication that whenever you want to use that app, okay, you need to provide, go through the MFA, which means your username and password is not just enough. You still have to, comply to MFA before you can gain access to that. Now, sometimes, based on what is on the screen, you see users or group membership, IP location, devices, application, risk detection. Now, it's not compulsory that all of these 6 conditions have to be in place. Some people are just fine with, okay, we want to do conditional access just based on location. Like if this set of users are trying to look at, they have to be maybe on the corporate network, because location has to do with IP address to determine where you are. So the policy can just be based on location. Policy can be on devices like, okay, we just want Windows users, or we just want Mac users, or we just want only Android and iOS for mobile, or so depending on this, you can enforce those policies. And some organizations can decide, okay, we want to use the 6 conditions, based on risks, based on application, based on devices, and they just set that policy. And what do I mean? Let me just show us briefly. I don't know if I should have premium license. That's another thing. Before you can use conditional access, there's a need for you to have an Azure Active Directory premium license. Okay, so the premium license, we have the basic, we have 3. Okay, we have basic, we have P1, we have P2. P2 is usually the highest premium license, which gives you room to services that P1 offers as well as basic offers. So for us to be able to use a conditional access, we need that policy. So let me go ahead. Condition. Okay, I have so Azure AD conditional access. That's because it's part of the Azure Active Directory feature. So you will see here, for you to use this conditional access, there is always policy in place. You just have to create policies. So usually you have to go to new, such that you can create policy. And I'll just show us an example. So part of it is you give the policy a name. So stylers policy. Okay, let me take stylers policy. Okay, so take notes. Part of it is users and groups. So the idea is, who are you enforcing this policy on? Is it to all users in your organization or just selected people? No, it shouldn't affect everyone. It's just selected people. So if you're doing all, it means regardless of the number of people or what their position is going to affect everyone in your organization. But if you're putting it for just selected people, you can now be okay. The selected people, are they maybe the guests, or guests and external users in your environment? Probably they're the one you want to put this policy on. You want the policy to, apply to them. Now you can, of course, you can create more than one policy. You can create a special policy to say, okay, this policy is just for the guests in my environment, or this policy are just for a particular department, or this policy is for everyone. So you can have more than one, conditional access policy. Now in a situation whereby you want to put the conditional access policy on groups, so I can have users and group. I can say, okay, fine, I want it to be a group. Let me see. I think I have a test group created here. So maybe test users. So I want this conditional access to apply to my test users. Test user is a group I created anyway, and I put that in place. So whatever policy I'm placing is going to affect the test users I have. Now let's go to the next one, which is cloud apps or action. We'll see that soon. Okay, so you're saying, do we want this policy to be on all the cloud apps, in our environment, or just selected app? Now, if it's selected app, you can decide, do you want it to affect Office 365, or you want it to affect the media service, or you want to, if I scroll down, you see tons of, these apps and services and all. So I can decide, okay, not exactly. I just want it to affect Office Suite. That's all. The policy is for Suite that whoever those users, that's my test users, whenever they want to access Office Suite, let this be, and I can decide, okay, not just Office Suite, I also want it to affect the analysis service and also I can decide how many cloud apps I want to affect. So I go ahead to select. Okay, now what are the conditions I'm trying to put in place? Right now, there are no conditions. Is it based on user risks, or based on user signing, or based on device platform, or based on location client type? So let me just go through all of them one after the other. So based on user risk, now this is usually configured for level. I can say if I'm configuring the user risk, if the risk is medium, okay, sorry, I need to turn it on first of all. So I want to configure it risk. I can decide, okay, I want the risk to be when it's medium or low or high, or okay, let's just have it as when it's medium. Okay, I can decide, okay, the sign-in risk, configure the sign-in risk as well, based on policy, medium. Now, it's not compulsory you do everything. That's what I'm saying. It depends on the requirement, the business requirement that usually brings up that usually affect this policy to be in place. Now, for device platform, remember, if I configure, I can decide, okay, these users, any device, from any device they are using, okay, let them be able to. I can decide, okay, whenever all those members of the test user are signing in from maybe iOS, or they're signing in from Android, or maybe they are even signing in from Mac OS. So whenever they are signing in from this particular, device, let them do this before they can gain access. So it's part of the policy that you can put in place. We also have locations. Okay, sorry, done. Don't forget, it's not compulsory that you go ahead to configure everything. Okay, so for location, you can decide, okay, yeah, they can, access from any location. You can decide, okay, I want it to be a trusted location, or I want to have a particular selected, location. So maybe based on the MFA trusted IP or your corporate network IP range. So you can decide which location that you want. You also have the client apps. So based on, okay, I want to the policy to apply to whenever people are, authenticating, maybe they're using the browser. Sorry, don't forget, you always have to configure, like maybe when they're using the browser, or maybe if they are trying to sign in from the mobile app and desktop client only. And when it comes to legacy authentication, that is, so you can have the active sync client, maybe from still with the mobile phone and all of it to Outlook. And if there's any other client, you can decide whatever. And we can decide, okay, none of this, just browser. It's only when they are trying to use, the browser. You can have the device state. If I configure it, I can say, okay, all states. But don't forget, it's not compulsory. I'm just taking us through uh, each and every one. And we also have filter for devices. So when I turn it on, I can decide, okay, include filter devices, for this policy such that I had, the extension for this filter to be in place. Again, organization is not compulsory that you configure all of these things, and you can go on. Once that is done, you can go on to either do you want to grant access. So for the grant access, you're saying all of these people, whenever they are trying to, if they've obeyed the condition that is in place, let's say, I'm sorry, for them to be able to gain access, rather, let them use multi-factor authentication. Or you can require to say, okay, not just the multi-factor, let it be that they're required to for their device to be domain joined. So I can do any of these option. Okay, I can use that to grant or block access. Okay, so it's either I'm allowing, my condition is allowing, or my condition is actually blocking. Whichever one, you can do so from the grant, whether you want to block access or you want to grant access. Okay, so select, then sessions to matter. Session has to do maybe using the conditional access app control or signing frequency. Like I can give this a number to say 3. So based on every 3 hours, let it be for their persistent browser session. I can say, okay, for this browser session, it's okay, it only works correctly for this. I don't have that in place. So you understand, these are just how you go about condition. Once you are done, we go ahead, turn it on and create. That way we have our conditional access in place. I'm sorry, I think I've dwelled too much on conditional access. We have to move on. Any question, please, before I move on to the next slide? Okay. I'm trying to check the meeting chat if there's a question there for me. All right, so like I said, we'll push the lab towards the end to see how much things we can cover. Okay, so let's move on, please. So let's go on to Azure Governance Methodology. And for this, we'll be looking at things around RBAC, things around resource log, tags, Azure Policy, Azure Blueprint, Cloud Adoption Framework. And these are the things we'll be looking at within the Azure Governance. Okay, so let's start with RBAC. What is RBAC? We call it role-based access control, RBAC. Okay, role-based access control. So for role-based access control, this usually focuses on users' action, at different scope. Let me use it that way. It focuses on controlling the access for users' action at a particular scope. That's what this RBAC does. And RBAC is a default deny. So with RBAC is like there's a default deny except you are permitting it, you are giving it some level of permission. So this Azure role-based access control actually plays an important role when it comes to governance. Okay, it's like trying to put you in your boundary. Okay, it enables you to have, the control to grant you, the minimum or the maximum amount of access that you need. So with RBAC, let's take for instance, I can have RBAC, I can put RBAC in place to grant you access to just a particular resource, okay, or to a resource group, or to a subscription, or to a tenant. So it has to do with different scope, or should I say level. I don't know. So it's like what we have stated here on the screen is saying it's a fine-grained access management. It segregates duties within the teams and grants only the amount of access to users so that they can perform their job. So if you do not need so much access, then there's no need, giving you such access. So you can enable this access to the Azure portal just to control access to resources. So these are the things you can use RBAC for. You can use it to allow app to access all the resource, maybe in a resource group, or you can use it to allow things to within your subscription, or um, you can use it to, it's just to give access. Let me use that in a very simple way that we all can understand and not get confused. I don't know if we have any question on that. Okay, so RBAC is, like I said, it's just to, grant access. You use it to segregate duty. You can use within your team. You can use it to just give that right amount of access. I'm sorry, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but there's something when it comes to scope, and that's the diagram that we have here on the screen. Okay, so there's something around scope, and the RBAC can be, assigned based on this scope. So we have the Azure Active Directory, or that's the tenant, okay, itself. Then it goes down, we have the, maybe there's something called Roots Management Group. We have the management group, we have the subscription, we have the resource group, and we have the resource. Now, in each resource group, of course, you have resources in each resource group. Resources can be VM, resources can be storage, resources can be app service, resources can be, any of these service, and you can have them in a resource group. I'm sure by now we know what resource group is. And a resource group can be attached to a particular subscription. Remember, in a tenant, you can have more than one subscription. Okay, so it can be tied to a subscription. So, excuse me, it can be tied to a subscription. And subscriptions are usually tied to the tenant. So based on that level, I can decide to grant RBAC at the subscription level. That subscription level means all the resource group within that subscription, I have access to it. So let's assume I have subscription 1, I have another subscription 2. If I give a particular person or a user, if I can use that word, maybe I grant uh Oriomi a particular access using her back role, I grant that maybe owner role or maybe contributor role, or we don't worry, we still look at those different roles that we have. And I'm saying, okay, I'm granting you an RBAC access to the subscription level and it's subscription 1. It means you'll be able to have access and do things within subscription 1 and not subscription 2. So which means within subscription 1, you'll be able to control and have things depending on that right that is being given to you. If it's a read only, of course, it means you cannot modify. If it's a contributor, of course, contributor, you can modify, you can create, but you cannot grant another person the role. But owner role, is like I in Iraq. And we have this different role. We have the Azure Active Directory role. We have the RBAC role. And of course, we look at the difference. But what I'm just trying to explain here regarding this RBAC is I can grant it based on subscription level. So if I'm granting OEM to say, okay, I'm giving RBAC role to subscription 1, and depending on that access, you'll be able to do things within subscription. So if you have 20 resource group within subscription 1, of course, all those resource group and the resources in it, you have access to it, but not subscription 2. Okay, so if I'm saying, okay, I want to grant the RBAC role just on the resource group level. So if I have 5 resource group and I'm giving you just resource group 1, it means the remainder 4, you do not have, control on those remainder 4 resource group. I don't know if you're getting me. So it depends on the scope. That's what we refer to as scope. And of course, if it's the tenant level, then so it depends on this particular RBAC rule that is being given to users or groups or apps. I don't know if you understand, please. If you have any question, please again feel free to ask question. I'm trying to check the meeting chat to see if anyone is using the raise your hand icon or putting question. And in the absence of no question, of course, we can move on. We'll talk about resource lock. Resource lock is pretty simple and straightforward. Okay, so when it comes to resource lock, it's actually a service within the Azure Active Directory just to prevent your resources from accidental delete. Okay, that is the main reason, or should I say the main essence of resource lock. When you think resource lock, it has to do with, simple English, locking resources to prevent unexpected changes, or locking resources to prevent accidental deletion or modification, just like it's stated here. So as an administrator, of course, this resource lock is essential. You need it, because if not, you realize that in a particular tenant where resources have been created and all, you have someone come in and just maybe delete this resource or something. So just to prevent, accidental delete, the slang is stories that touch, to prevent any accidental delete or users from modifying something that you have done. Of course, you can put the resource lock in place, and we have just two types of resource lock that can be applied. So you have the cannot delete. Okay, this essentially prevents anyone tenant from deleting resource while it's the lock is in place. Of course, you can make changes. You can modify to say, okay, I want to make changes to this particular resource and all, but then you cannot delete to prevent you from deleting. Okay, that's why the table here is saying, can you read? Which means do you have view permission when it's on cannot delete mode? Yes. Can you update? Can you modify and make changes? Yes. But can you delete? No, you cannot delete. Now we also have the second type of resource lock that can be applied, is the read only. Okay, just like the name suggests, you can only read, you can only view, you cannot make changes. And of course, not only can you can also not delete. Okay, so with this, you can only view, you won't be able to update, you won't be able to make any modification. And of course, you also cannot delete. And that's the essence of resource lock. And the resource lock can be applied to subscription, it can be applied to resource group, it can be applied to individual resources as required. It can be applied to these things within your tenant, and it's really essential, especially for an administrator. Okay, so you can provide a resource lock on those things. Okay, moving on, we there's a lab here for resource lock, and of course we would see all of that. Don't forget, they're trying to push the lab to a later time where we can focus only on the lab, so we won't be doing the lab right away. So let's talk about tags. Tags. I'm sure in layman English you understand what tags is. So tags within Azure, which we call, you can call it resource tag and all. It's just consists of the name and the value. That's what these tags usually contain. It contains name and value, and essentially one use them to organize or to organize resources in your tenants. Okay, so it helps to logically organize or categorize resources. Azure resources. That's what you use the tag for. So let's take, for instance, we can apply tag, apply maybe a name, department name, or a particular department, can be IT or HR or this, to the resource. So that way we are associating them that resource to a particular department. We are giving it that. But don't forget, when it comes to, there's always a name and a value in place. Okay, so that's one thing about tagging. As I says, logically organize resource into a taxonomy. It consists of a name value pair, which I have mentioned, and is very useful for rolling up billing information. So yes, tags, you can apply them to the resource group, and but then they are not inherited by the resources in that resource group. Okay, so that's one thing we should take note of. And of course, you can create tags using the Azure portal, as well as PowerShell or even CLI. We can use that to create tags, and that's what tags are used for. Okay, next year we have the walkthrough for tagging, and sorry, let me move on. We have Azure Policy. Azure Policy. I'm sure by now we understand what policy is right now. So when it comes to policy, this sometimes can be taken for, what's it called, RBAC and all, but it's not. Policy here is it has to do with setting, enforcing governance. If I can put that in place, you can use it to enforce governance. And Azure Policy by default allows the system, which means it allows you to set properties or things to your Azure resources. Okay, it's unlike RBAC. Remember, I said RBAC by default is denied, except you explicitly allow it. But for policy, it gives you this allow this thing. It focuses more on the properties, the resource properties, especially during maybe deployment or things or resources that already exist. Okay, so it's that's basically what it does. And of course, the policy could be implemented. You can add a tag, to this policy. They are majorly for governance. So what we have here on the screen says it helps to enforce organizational standard and access compliance at scale. It also provides, governance and resource consistency with regulatory compliance, security, cost, and management. Okay, so we have other things that like, okay, it evaluates and identify Azure resources that do not comply to the policy. So that's one thing. It helps provide built-in policy and initiate definitions under categories such as, storage, networking, just this all other resources that one has in place. Okay, so policies here can be issued to ensure maybe users can I'm trying to give an example. We have an organization, and in that organization, of course, maybe the organization is trying to manage costs, which means people should not just come from an IT person just because they have, that role or that access or that permission to create a VM, and people just come to create just any VM. Probably the VM they're creating is an high level VM. What I mean is, in terms of costing, is more expensive. So they create this VM and is incurring cost on the organization. So with policy, this is something that you can do. You can set the policy, you can issue policy to ensure that users do not create or deploy a particular type of VMs. For the VMs, we have different series. We have the B series, we have the D series, we have the N series, the F series, So you can put it categorically or specify categorically that you do not want users to just, go ahead to deploy any, maybe D series, for instance, or F series. You don't want that. Anyone that has to do that needs to get permission. That way you'll be able to control what is going on in your environment. So it's really great. Within Azure, we have some built-in policy in place within Azure. Okay, built-in policy in terms of allowing maybe storage or allowing a particular virtual machine SKU, or allowing location, enforcing tags or requiring tags, something like that. So we have some built-in policy in place, but you can always specify yours based on your business requirement. So that's regarding Azure policy. No. So there's actually what's it called? Lab for that to do Azure policy. So next here is blueprints. Blueprints is very similar to what's it called? To policy. Okay. But then it's higher. So what is blueprint in this case? If we look at the traditional, when we just say blueprint in a layman English, is usually used by architects or maybe an engineers to design and build new things. Okay, so they'll use it to ensure that whatever they are designing, whatever they are doing, their final product is built into such, standards that they have in place, or such built into a particular specification or requirement that is in place. So the same idea about blueprints, in the traditional sense, that same idea is what we have the Azure blueprint as. Okay, it will enable cloud architects, or, to define maybe a repeatable set of Azure resources that you can implement and adhere to the organization standard and pattern and requirements. So there's a standard in place. So if this is your standard, what it means is your deployment, all through your organization or tenant will follow that blueprint. That's if you're using blueprint. So there won't be there won't be a difference. Everyone would adhere to the same what's it called, standard. Everyone would adhere to the same requirement. So most of the time within Azure, the IT engineers or the administrator uses this blueprint to design and deploy a repeatable collection of Azure resources such that it adheres to the requirement and that standard. Okay, that's what the blueprint is for. So it will help with setting up the environment, which of course in an environment you will have different things in place, things like resource group. You have resource groups in your environment, resources that are in the resource group in your environment. You have policies, you have role assignment, you have the resource template, and all of these things. Now the blueprint here brings all of these things together. So it's more or less like a package that brings together all of these things that I just mentioned that consist in your organization, such that they are there to the organization standard, okay, and requirements. So that's what this blueprint is for. If I have to read what is on the screen here, I said makes it possible for development team to rapidly build and stand up new environment. Now, development teams can quickly build trust through organizational compliance with set of built-in components, maybe for networking, just in order to speed up development and delivery. So you have role assignment, the policy assignment, the Azure Resource Manager, resource group, just those things I have mentioned. So that's usually um, what blueprint is for. Okay, can you use it to set up a deployment faster? Okay, now the question might be, how does it differ from policy? you know if I'm trying to comply to specific standard and requirements. So how does that differ from policy? Okay, now policy, like I explained earlier, is this is like a default allow, and it focuses on the resource properties during deployment. That's what's called the policy does. That's what it, but for the blueprint here, even the policy is part of the blueprint, is inclusive. Okay, so it's the blueprint here would ensure or the creation is in the right pattern or the right design during deployment. So that's the difference. So your policy is actually part of your blueprint. I don't know if you understand me. So if I don't know if you have any question before I move to the next slide. Any question, please? Okay, so in the absence of no question, we move on to cloud adoption framework. Cloud adoption framework. Now, when it comes to the cloud adoption framework, this is just Microsoft's approach, to cloud adoption. So it's just an approach. There's usually a plan in place. There's usually strategy that you need to have. There's usually some of these things. So they're part of the cloud adoption framework. Okay, not to go too much into details. It's like, okay, you want to adopt the cloud. We have this traditional, what's it called? Traditional approach, the on-premises, and we are trying to move into the cloud. So usually there are things that have to be in place, before you can adopt the cloud. So those things, they are around planning. Okay, so what are the plans that you're trying to put in place? So there is usually, I'm starting with the plan, based on what is on the screen. There is usually plan in place, planning for a particular thing. Like there's usually the business justification as to why are we even moving to the cloud. So probably let's take for instance, we have organization, and the organization, the main purpose or reason they want to move to the cloud is so that they can cut costs, because they understand that they're spending too much. Remember the capex and opex that we talked about in the beginning of this, I mean, some trainings back. Okay, that we said the capital expenditure, the operational expenditure. So the organization is looking at it like, okay, we spend money on servers, we spend money on some things. We just want to adopt the cloud, for this reason, for just for cost essence. And some organization could be like, okay, we want to adopt the cloud for high availability. It's because we always have issue with high availability, so there's always this reason. There's always this situation as to why organizations are trying to adopt the cloud. So based on that reason, okay, there has to be some justification in place. So you define that business justification, and there's always like a desired result or a desired outcome for this justification. And you need to plan. You need to plan because things around network concerns, things around, okay, the subscription, things around the resources, like something around which what is our current infrastructure, what is our current IT infrastructure. That's based on organization. And what's change management process are we looking at, like what are those things, how many employees do we have, now that we are planning to move to the cloud and all, how many employees do we have. You have to just put this thing into place, and once that is done, there is the ready mode, such that you this readiness prepares the environment for cloud adoption. Then you have to migrate most of these services that you have on premises or in your organization. You migrate them to the cloud, so you can migrate existing workload. Okay, and after you migrate, of course, there's usually the adoption phase, which yes, we've migrated. So how do we go about managing these resources? How do we educate? That's where trainings could come in for users. That's where you could have, okay, let's have partners work with us and all of this. So it's like an end-to-end plan, or should I say delivery for an organization. So this planning are very well required. So you just have to put them in place. So afterwards, then of course the drive adoption is just the continuous use. I don't know if you're able to get me. So this is like an approach in Microsoft where you have to now work with the best practices from either the Microsoft employees if you are using Fast Track, or you Microsoft partners and customers. Then the tools probably tools for migration, the guidance, the narrative for strategies and outcome. Don't forget that the end goal of this cloud adoption has to do with results, the result that is in place. I don't know if we have any question concerning the cloud adoption framework. Okay, so let's move into privacy, compliance, and data protection. Okay, so privacy, compliance, data protection, still in the beginning of the training when we're talking about authentication, Azure Active Directory, we're looking at the security part. Now we're looking at the privacy, compliance, as well as data protection. Now we're going to be at the end of the day, we should be able to describe the purpose for Microsoft core tenants of security, privacy, and compliance. We should be able to state the online service terms, the data protection amendment, trust center, Azure compliance documentation, and of course the Azure sovereign regions, which we are going to look at because of this training. So let's take a look at security, privacy, and compliance. Okay, so what is security in this system? Security, of course, when it comes to Azure, this is one of the, it's not even Azure, Microsoft product generally. Microsoft invests so much in security, based on this cybersecurity. Microsoft have been able to manage, so much in security. So with this built-in intelligence security, Microsoft has found a way to help protect, our data, our resources from the cyber threat using automation as well as artificial intelligence. So of course, when it comes to security also requires some planning. Let me take it back to the cloud adoption. It requires some planning. One needs to, put all of those planning in place. Yes, we know that Azure comes with some inbuilt security, but it also requires you want to be able to plan if you be adopting the cloud. So we also have privacy. Okay, so privacy here is committing and ensuring that the privacy of organization through the agreement. Okay, ensuring that you do not have what's it called, customers' data, exposed, or customers' data available to everyone. So that way, Microsoft is letting you know that they help protect, customers' data. They help protect customers' privacy, and for that, Microsoft actually follow some safeguard. They follow some standard around restricted access, standard around data encryption, standard around data mining, data ownership. So Microsoft do well, to ensure that is there. And we also have the aspect of compliance. Okay, so Microsoft do have respect for the law because there's so many regulatory bodies. Okay, so there's this respect for the law when it comes to compliance. So Microsoft, you know, is compliant, and they let you understand that okay, they follow, these compliance services, the local laws, even federal regulations that is being covered. Things around just different compliance which we will be looking at. Let me just let me not digress too much. Let me try to stay to the slide. Okay, so yeah, for the compliance, we have this compliance offering that Microsoft has actually put in place. We have the CJIS, Criminal Justice Information Service, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. We have the ISO. ISO is, I'm sure ISO is common. It's something that a lot of us can familiarize ourselves with. Okay, we have all of these compliance in place. We have the EU model and clauses. We have the NIFT, NIST, that's the National Institute of Standard Technology. So we have all of these in place, and Microsoft is letting us know that, okay, all of these things, we are very well compliant with these things in place. So I don't know if we have any question. I'm sorry I didn't go into details. I'm trying to see if I can still cover the last module. Okay, that's why I'm moving that way. So they're just, okay, to slow down a bit, I would just say, when it comes to Microsoft Azure, they offer this variety of security and compliance feature just to help organization comply to certain level of, regulations, whether it's federal regulations or local regulations or even international regulation, and they help keep customers' data secure. That is the essence. So some of it include what we have on the screen. For instance, this HIPAA, what it does is it imposes strict privacy regulation for customers that possess electronic protected health information. That's basically what they are around. Okay, when it comes to the health, what's it called, information, that's what this particular body into. Okay, the ISO is common. That has to do with international, standard, what's it called again? The IEC, if I remember clearly. I know the IEC has to do with International Electrotechnical Commission. Okay, that's the IEC. So the ISO should be something around information security. I'm sorry, I can't remember the last O in this place, but it's actually around that. And of course, this body, they are best known for standard around information security and management system. And Microsoft Azure actually meets with this security benchmark based on whether it's physical or it's logical, or maybe there's a process or management control. Yes, Microsoft actually, keep to this. We also have the EU models. Okay, I'm picking at random now. Now, these EU models, of course, it has to do with the EU data protection directives, and this actually is a key instrument when we talk about EU privacy and human rights law, which means with EU model, it's letting us know that you cannot just transfer personal data out of the EU. They have to comprise of the preferred method for the data transfer outside the EU. So we have all of these different compliances that you have to follow through in place, and Microsoft is letting you know that, okay, yes, we provide this and we're able to meet this standard. So I don't know if we have any question. If not, I can move on. Okay, so let's look at the Microsoft privacy statement. Microsoft privacy statement. Okay. Usually the Microsoft privacy statement offers what's it called? Openness and honesty about how Microsoft handle the user's data collected from its products and services. Okay, and things around what data Microsoft processes, how Microsoft processes it, and what purpose this data are used for. So really, that's Microsoft has that privacy statement. So you'll be able to understand like the data protection addendum, okay, and of how Microsoft basically uses this data. So their privacy statements would cover all Microsoft services, including the website, including apps, including services and devices. Now, this list they can be different from organizations to organization, but then they have different privacy statement that is relevant for specific products. Product like Windows product. We have Microsoft Windows products. So there's a specific statement regarding that. Okay, so you will know that whenever you have the maybe for instance even their Windows operating system, when you get it, there's usually this privacy statement that most of the time we don't get to read, but yes, it's always in place. Microsoft do provide this statement. They put it in place to tell you what they use the data for, how the data is being used, and the purpose. Okay, so Microsoft do have that in place. Okay, we have something called online service term and data protection addendum. The online service term here is OST. Okay, OST is actually there's this is like a legal agreement between the customer as well as Microsoft. Excuse me, please. An agreement between the customer and Microsoft such that there's a detailed obligation by both parties, what both parties need to do with respect to probably processing and securing the customer's data, okay, or even personal data. So the OST usually would apply specifically to all Microsoft online services that you have license to probably through the subscription. For instance, the SaaS service offering like Microsoft 365, like Dynamics 365, even Azure that we are looking at. Of course, we have OST, and don't forget, it's usually a legal condition between the customer as well as Microsoft itself. Okay, we also have this DPA, which we call the Data Protection Addendum. Okay, so for this one, usually it defines the data processing and security terms for our online services, things that has to do with compliance with the law, things that has to do with disclosure of processed data, things that has to do with data security, things that has to do with data transfer, or even data retention and deletion. You know, those are the focus of the data protection addendum. And of course, for that, one has to go through, probably if you want to do that, you have to go through some licensing terms and documentation, in order to have that. And it's usually in place with all Microsoft products or Microsoft services. Okay, so I don't know if we have question, please don't forget you can make use of the. Okay, I think there's a question here. Which is more effective between Office 365 MFA and Azure AD MFA? Okay, so before I go to the next slide, I will quickly answer that. When we have, when we say MFA, multi-factor authentication, we have just one, and it's actually an Azure Active Directory feature. I will explain that further. When it comes to Microsoft 365, okay, the users, there is always an instance of Azure created when you subscribe to M365. And the reason is because Azure Active Directory manages the user's identity in your tenant. So even if you are actually subscribing to a SaaS offering, which in this case is Office 365, or we can say Microsoft 365. Okay, the Azure Active Directory actually manages all these what's it called? Users' identities, such that they're able to they have the authentication and authorization in place. Now, when it comes to MFA, it can be used within M365, but it is actually what's it called? It's actually a feature of the Azure Active Directory. I don't know if you're understanding me. Let me explain further to answer that question. Class, please permit me to, just answer this question before I get onto the slide. So let's take it back to home. Okay, so right here, I have my M365 environment. Let me go to the M365 Admin Center. Okay, so here I have my Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Okay, and let me just show, if I go to my users, you will see here, these are the users I have within my environment. Okay, and I have this feature of multi-factor authentication. If I click on it, just observe something, please. It brings me to, it brings me to this multi-factor authentication page, but take a look at the URL. See, it's actually part of the Active Directory account, but that's not where I'm even going. So this service, of course, you can manage it in here, but let's go back to Azure itself. Now I'm going to the Azure Active Directory. If you remember, the same users I have here, I equally have those same users on my Azure Active Directory, exact user. Okay, when it comes to MFA, yes, I can manage the MFA directly here, which is multi-factor authentication. So this is where I manage all of the settings. So it's actually an Azure Active Directory feature. Yes, I can use it within M365 because even M365 here, it has the Azure Active Directory, what's it called? Admin Center that redirects us back to the Azure portal. I don't know if you are getting me. So whatever you do in the M365 site, when it comes to MFA, it affects the Azure part. And when you do it within the Azure part, it affects the M365 part. Remember, when you subscribe for any SaaS application, which Office 365 or M365, I think I'll just call it Microsoft 365 because that's the new name now. Okay, whatever you do within the M365 space, yes, you can also control that in the Azure Active Directory on the Azure portal. So it's not like they use two different kinds of MFA. No, it's still the same MFA and it's even better managed within the Azure Active Directory portal, or should I say Azure portal. I don't know if you're able to get me, please. Did you see the difference? All right, thank you for that. So the MFA, if I click here, the guide or anything, though I can manage it within here to say, okay, I want to enable MFA for this person, or for instance, this particular person here, MFA is enabled. So I can go ahead to say, okay, I want to disable for this user. I don't want this user to use MFA again. Close. Okay, so if I go to my Azure Active Directory or even the Azure portal for MFA, I can always do that. But in the Azure space is where I can do all of the better management in terms of settings. I do it right here in Azure. But when it comes to enrolling user, to say, okay, I want my users to use it. Yes, you can do both in the Azure Active Directory space, or you can do that in the M365 space. But when it comes to managing the settings, putting the settings in place and all, you can only get to do that in the Azure Active Directory, Azure portal. All right, back to our question. Let's talk about Trust Center. Please, if you have more questions, feel free to, ask or put it in the meeting chat, please. I will do well to answer all of our questions, please. Okay, the more we ask questions, the better we are able to gain knowledge and even see different scenarios. So let's talk about Trust Center. So for Trust Center, the where we learn about the privacy, compliance, and security, all the features. So the Trust Center here is actually a website, okay, and this website provides us with in-depth expert information, curated list of recommended resources, things around role specific information, and so on and so forth. So we have that in place in what's it called in the Azure Active Directory. So it's a site. I think I can help us get the site link. 1 minute. Let me see if I can get that quickly. Um, 1 minute. I'm trying to see if I can get that site. Share the link with us, or even bring it up here. Okay, 1 minute. Trying to browse through here to see if I can get that trust center. Okay, I think I'm able to find mine. Okay. Sorry, don't let me waste our time. I'm trying to see if I can get the link to the trust center and all. But basically, when it comes to this trust center and what we have, Microsoft do well. They have all of these things in place, and they're in different countries. So I'm sorry, I'll try and get the link. I know we have the link somewhere, but I'm unable to get hold of it now. So this trust center, basically, in a simple term, is just provides information about different security aspects to the tenants in any of the Microsoft services, whether it is Azure or M365. You have in that trust center, you have topics like around privacy by design, topics around continuous compliance, topics around what's it called? Transparent operation, and so on and so forth. So we have that in place in the trust center. I'm just trying to see if I can get the link. All right, please, I'll try and see if I can get that before the end of this training, but not to waste time. That's regarding this trust center. Okay, so you just get a list of all of these things that are needed. So we have the lab for trust center. Let's move on to Azure compliance documentation. Okay, so for documentation, of course, is something um, that Microsoft offer. They offer this, set of compliance just to organization to help them comply with national or regional or industry specific requirement that governs the collection of their data. That's what this Azure compliance documentation is about. So in essence, when it comes to I'm trying to see if I can get a scenario. It just gives us details. When we say something is documentation, it has to do with details. It gives us detailed information about specific things. And in this question, it gives us detailed information about regulatory standard. It gives us detailed information about compliance on Azure. Detailed information about, the legal things and all. And of course, the compliance offering are in different categories based on what is listed here on the screen. Categories around US government, categories around industry, categories around whether it's global or it's regional. So we have all of those category in place. Of course, there are other compliance resources as well that are not listed here. Maybe we have let me remember, we have for audit reports, so one can get documentation around audit report, and of course maybe countries and region privacy can have this compliance guidance included. So some resources might require that you need to sign in to your cloud to be able to access them. That's some of these things, but the compliance documentation is just to help organization with the legal terms, those things they need to know, or they need to be aware of. So that's what this Azure compliance does. Okay, we also have here the Azure sovereign regions. Okay, and this has to do with data centers. Now for the sovereign regions, we have Azure government. Okay, so this is actually a separate instance of the Microsoft Azure services, and what it does is it addresses things around the security and compliance needs of the US agencies, states, and local governments, as well as the solution they provide. So Azure governments offer that physical isolation from the non-US government and deploy and provide things to just US personnel. Okay, so we have that, and that's the Azure governance regarding the US government services. Okay, so that's what Azure government does. So it handles data that is subject to maybe certain government regulations and requirement, things around Department of Defense, things around Internal Revenue Services, things around criminal justice information service, things around, which one do we have again? National Institute of Standard and Technology, things, we just have different things. I think they're even listed here on the screen. So these are the compliant standard, and the idea is to provide that highest level of security and compliance for them. Don't forget that this government body is usually totally different from the organizations, where you have organizations or schools or this. So for the government body, there's like a special or dedicated, um, government for them, if I can put it that way. So government usually will use this fiscally isolated data center, as well as even the network, to locate things in the Azure government customer, things around federal states, local states, partners, and so on and so forth. So usually we have that in place, and it's actually available in 8 local regions. That's this Azure government is available in 8 local region in terms of geography, though. I know it's available in 8. So yes, those we have in place. It says separate instance is a separate instance of Azure, fiscally isolated from non-US government. I think I mentioned that, and is accessible only to screened and authorized personnel. So have here. So let's talk about Azure sovereign region for China. So there are 3 regions like that. I know we have for US, we have for China, and as well as Germany. And even these people I mentioned, they have their own unique data centers, okay, that has their own name and whatever. So yes, these particular Azure sovereigns are in place. So let's talk about that of China. I know we have for, yes, if I'm not mistaken, we have for US, we have for China, and there's for Germany. So I don't know if that has been updated, and because even regarding their clusters, they have their different name. For China, it was referred to as mooncake. For Germany, it was the dark forest. I mean, in terms of the names of the cluster. And for US, it was flare flags or flare flags. If I did pronounce it very well, please forgive me. So, but we have all of these sovereign region in place. Now, for China, China is usually operated by this by 21 VNets, which it has its own physically separated instance of cloud that is located in China. Okay, it is independent. Okay, and it is so only this is owned by I don't know how to put it, like it's just for China. So unlike the way we have here in Nigeria, where our service, of course, we can use that of the data center in maybe US region, or we can use the South Africa region, because I know Microsoft has data center in South Africa, or we can use the Europe, that's the West UK or West Europe region. But for China, they just have their own. And that's because of their regulatory bodies, the things they have to, their compliance and all of them. So according to their own, no, there's this, they have this telecommunication regulation. Now, providers of cloud services, whether it is EAS or it's PaaS, okay, they must locally register their company with at least less than 50% foreign investment that qualify for this permit. That's their rule, and it really works for China. And for that reason, Microsoft, of course, does have this China region for them. So this particular region, which is in China, follows suit with the compliance and regulation for China body. I don't know if you want more information. Don't forget the test center usually provide documentation around this compliance and regulation. Of course, we can get it there. Now, the Azure services are based on the same Azure. The same Azure that is available to everyone is also the one that is available in China. The difference is just that there's an agreement. There is an agreement and contract with the customers as well as China. So it's just based on their own law. That's how I can put it. And it supports all of these Azure services that we have looked at and we have talked about. Okay, the EAS PaaS SaaS offering, the same EAS PaaS SaaS offering that Microsoft have for other regions and all is the same thing that it has in China. Theirs is just different based on their compliance and regulation. They have their own unique compliance. So for you to operate in China, you might have to, do things afresh. That's if today you have a company and you're thinking, okay, I want to go to China. Now you cannot use, maybe while you're here in Nigeria, you have your company and your data resides in maybe the West US region and all of it. Now, if tomorrow you decide, okay, I want to start or I want to move, I want to be in China and I want to offer my, what my service and everything in China, my customers are in China, and for that reason, you have to comply to the regulatory body to, either you are rehosting or refactor to ensure all your application or services are within, they operate in China. I don't know if you understand me, please. So these are, things around the Azure sovereign regions. Okay, so think that's all about this. I was really hoping we could take 2 slides together. Unfortunately, we just finished one. But please, do we have any question? Okay, so I think there's a question in the meeting chat. One more question. I'm sorry, might be out of scope, but please, what is the difference between M365 as well as Azure Security as well as cyber security engineer? Okay, so I will start answering by the ladies, please. It's actually time up, but please can you give me just maybe 5 minutes to answer this question before we call it a day?
Yes, no problem.
All right, please. Thank you very much. Okay, so for M365, it's a product, it's a Microsoft product, is also a platform. And M365, which is the Microsoft 365, is a SaaS offering, is a cloud-based, subscription-based cloud offering. And these are what offer services like, we have services like Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, things like, what else again? Teams, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Yammer, Microsoft 365 Hub for Enterprise, and those services go on and on. Okay, I think I was trying to bring up my system to just show us, those services. Okay, so let me just do this. So M365 basically offer us this. I wanted to show all the services. Uh-oh. I'm not creating. I need that. Okay. Oh, so all of these services that we have here in place. So Microsoft 365, although Microsoft 365, if you look at documentation to tell you that it has things to do with Windows 10, Office 365, as well as enterprise mobility and security. But please, not to confuse us. I'm just trying to say M365 here is a SaaS offering. Now, for Azure, Azure is also Microsoft cloud products. It offers both EAS and PaaS. The infrastructure gives this infrastructure as a service offering, platform as a service offering. So all that we can achieve in Azure. Now we understand these two different technology. So this is Azure here. Let me see if I can go to no, this was just resources. I'm trying to see if I could get services and all. I don't have subscription, so we might not really see that here. I was just trying to see if I can paint a picture for us. So for Azure, so when you say a security person, let me look at that question again. Security engineer. Now the security engineer for M365 is just within the M365 environment, like security engineer for M365 environment only. Okay, when we say Azure security engineer for Azure, now we have been able to differentiate them based on product. Now the cyber security here is holistic. Okay, so you're not being what's it called, product based. Okay, you are trying to say in terms of cloud as a whole. Okay, cybersecurity in terms of a cloud as a whole. I don't know if we are able to understand it, please. So the difference between them is by their product, and one is like an umbrella for everything. So I think we can do this together. What I remember it's just 2 minutes left. We can do this together. Let me bring up um Google so that we can understand. I want to do it based on certification this time around, so that we can all see it for ourselves, the difference. So I know AZ 500 is the security engineer, and MS 500 for M365 security engineer. So let's see this. So this is AZ 500. So also, oh, why? I don't need this. Sorry. Um, Okay, so if we see what we have here, this particular M3 is focus. The focus is on M365, and if we go through this, you see, candidate for this exam can manage, monitor security and compliance solution for M365 and hybrid environment. So everything you are doing is within M365. So if you are certified or you are being called M365 security engineer, it means you can manage things around security within M365 environment. Now let me take a go back to check that of Easy 500. Oh, where is this taking me to? This is not what I want. Please, 2 minutes. Is it 500? Okay, so if you see this, it says here the responsibility of this is include maintaining and securing posture, identifying remediation, all the story to end-to-end infrastructure. So it's basically on Azure product and services, if you look at it very well. So the focus here in terms of environment is Azure. Now let's even Google together cybersecurity just to clear doubts. So that's why I said it's holistic. It is not, the focus is not on a particular, you can be a cybersecurity person for Microsoft. You can be a cybersecurity person for AWS. You can be a cybersecurity engineer for, Google, and so on and so forth. Any of these other services. I don't know if you understand, and their own purpose, their main purpose here is the practice, just like what we have here, things around protection of computers, around networks, hardware, software, and things as a whole. And if you ask me, cybersecurity on its own is a technology. It's just like the way we have cloud computing as a technology, the way we have machine learning and AI as a technology, the way we have big data as technology, the way we have quantum computing as technology, cyber security also is a technology on its own. I don't know if I'm able to answer your question. All right, please. Ladies, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your time. You've given me like some minutes more to just answer question, and I appreciate you doing that. Okay, so we are ending our class next week. Next week is the last class for this particular course, and we would be seeing what we'll be doing next. And next week when we end it, I think I was able to speak with Foyin, and we're able to come with an agreement of finding a way to create maybe some resource group or um, put people in our own tenants such that you'll be able to make use of these tenants on your own to do some lab practices and all. But don't forget, we'll be giving you an RBAC role, maybe contributor role to specific resources or a resource group where you can practice some of these things that you've learned, and that way you'll be able to, because I know fully well the trial tenant, the subscription has ended usually after a month. So that's the plan, and that's what we have come up with, and we'll be sending these details across to us. But our last class or our final class is next week. Thank you, ladies, for your time. I don't know if you have any question or contribution. We have actually come to the end of the training for today.
Thank you so much for your time. So,
All right.
good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, ladies. You guys are actually awesome. Thanks for your patience, everything. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
And you too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.